title is going to be An Excellent Spirit. And we're going to be coming from the book of Daniel, which is another new thing for me, Old Testament basis. I am going to mostly be working out of the Amplified tonight. But, Mighty, I know you have King James or New King James, and I know other people have King James or NIV. So please keep those available with you in case, maybe if you see something that you'd like to share in that. Or I may ask you to give us what the New King James is. And so if somebody has it available, that would be great. Okay. But mostly tonight, I want to come out of the Amplified Bible, and we're going to be coming out of the book of Daniel. We're going to briefly read, we're going to read chapter 5, verses 12 and 14. And then we're going to spend the rest of our time in chapter 6. Okay? So if you look at, just let's talk about our title, right? An excellent spirit. So if you go to, come on, in the name. All right. Everybody have a good day today. Did anybody get stuck in the traffic of all time, between yesterday and today? I had a couple of my coworkers, they had to turn around and go home yesterday because they were in traffic for like 2 hours, and they weren't even anywhere near the office, coming from East Providence. So it was a lot. But I didn't have that problem because I live right down the street from the church. No, but that's really true too. I didn't, because now I don't live on that side, so I don't even have to do the highway. I just go through Blackstone Boulevard, and even that is backed up because people are coming off like the Henderson Bridge and stuff. But I found a little side street that goes right down by the water, all the way in the back, so I don't even have to deal with any. So I just, because you don't have to deal. But then when you saw it was because they were closing down parts of the highway. The one night they were backed because everybody, and they started letting kids out early because they had kids trapped on school buses, and now a lot of them are on remote until the end of the year because they're supposed to be, it's supposed to take them like 3 months to fix it. So it makes no sense. But in any event, I digress. So let's look at chapter 5, verses 12 and then verse 14. And I'll just read them from the Amplified. I have them highlighted here because I already knew. I'm actually going to start at verse 11. And this is King Belshazzar. If you're not familiar with Belshazzar, read Daniel. But this is when he was, having a little party, and a hand came out and started writing on the wall, and he didn't know what it meant. So his queen says to, he's trying to figure out what's going on. You can read it all. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. And she says to him, there's a man in your kingdom in whom is a spirit of the holy gods. Now, she's talking about gods, not the living God. But obviously, there is something about him that has distinguished himself, right? Or distinguished him. And in the days of your father, meaning Nebuchadnezzar, right? Because that's who was in the beginning. Illumination, understanding, and wisdom like the wisdom of the gods were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, again, I'm in the Amplified, so it's breaking it up, appointed him chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and diviners. It was because an extraordinary, now again, Amplified, spirit, knowledge and insight, the ability to interpret dreams, clarify riddles, and solve complex problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will give the interpretation. So we see there, it says in the Amplified, it breaks it to extraordinary, but it does, if you read the King James translation, that word extraordinary is translated as excellent. Okay, so he has an excellent spirit. And then she goes on to talk about all his things. And we're going to cover some of that when we move to the next part of our lesson. And then Daniel 6 and 3, which is the basis, I guess you would say. It says, now we're in Daniel 6. This is going to be where Daniel is going to end up getting thrown in the lion's den, right? And so we're talking about, this is like kind of an intro to him and King Darius, and he's going to wants to set people over the kingdom and put them in charge. And he's thinking of Daniel because, and as you'll see in chapter 3, it says, then this Daniel, because of the, again, extraordinary or excellent spirit within him, began distinguishing himself among the commissioners and the satraps, and the king planned to appoint him over the entire realm. So keep that in mind, because we're going to come back to that. But you see here in 5 and 6 that he has been multiple times, his spirit and the spirit that is within him or operates within him, or that he exhibits in his life, is referred to multiple times as extraordinary or excellent, right? So let's just look at that word excellent, and I'm gonna do excellent because that's where the Amplified got their translation from. So if we look at excellent in the Strong's Concordance, remember we use the Strong's when we are looking to find the direct meaning of the word in its original translation, right? So we're in the Old Testament, so we're in the Hebrew section here, and Strong's, it's number 03493, and the word for that is yatir. It's spelled Yattir, and they did a pronunciation which I cannot do. He was like yatir, and I was like, yeah, I can't do all that. So it's yatir because I'm English, right? And as an adjective, it means preeminent, surpassing, extreme, extraordinary, noble. And then as an adverb, or descriptor, exceedingly or extremely, okay? So I wanted to start there, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit, just that part. So Daniel has been referred to as having an excellent spirit, right? I want to talk a little bit tonight about what that means, how that showed up in his life, and how you can exhibit the same and develop and exhibit the same type of spirit. Make sense? So the way I want to do that is I want to start we're going to start in Daniel chapter 1. So if you can go back to 1 in your Bible, and we're going to kind of walk through this together tonight, which actually works out well because it's a small number of us. So we're going to walk through it together. And if you have questions, comments, as you know, always please grab a mic and have at it. It's Daniel chapter 1. So what I want to do is I want to first start. So where do we find ourselves here in Daniel, beginning in Daniel, right? Chapter 1. So when I say Daniel, the first thing that comes to your mind is what? The lion's den, right? That's the story, right? Like all of us, right? Even myself, right? That's what you think of is Daniel. And then I think of Revelation and all of that, because my dad used to study it all the time, and Daniel works in conjunction with end time prophecy, so that's the two things I think of. But we mostly think of the lion's den, right? But thanks be to God that my pastor gave me this assignment, because I looked at some things that I hadn't really looked at before. I broadened my understanding a little bit. So when we open up in Daniel 1, we're looking at the beginning for Daniel. This is just when they've entered into captivity. Right at the beginning of the 70 years of captivity, right? Everyone familiar with that Israel was taken into captivity for 70 years, right? Okay, so they've been taken into captivity. The king at this time is Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. He comes over and he takes people and takes them into captivity, right? So when you read chapter 1, it's going to tell you how Daniel ended up there, okay? And I want you to go down to verse 3. I'm going to read it for you. What the king did was he would take the young men, different types of young men, and he would take them and groom them to be used in his service, right? So they weren't slaves per se, but they were in captivity, and he would take them and have them do certain things, groom them, teach them, so that they would be fit for service for him. So I want to take just a few minutes to look at what some of the requirements or some of the characteristics that the king looked for when he was choosing from the young men in Jerusalem. Yes, so somebody was reading because they knew, because that's my friend, and they know what I do all the time. So let's look at some of these requirements, because what this is going to do is let us know about some more things about Daniel, because he was one of these young men, that was chosen, right? So we already talked about he comes from got a noble background, right? Because he's in the lineage of David and all of that, right? He comes from the tribe of Judah, right? Okay, so I'm going to just read through these few verses here and just give you So I'm in verse, I'm starting in verse 3. I'm going to read 3 and 4 again in the Amplified. And the Babylonian king told Ashpenaz, the chief of his officials, to bring in some of the sons of Israel, including some from the royal family and from the nobles. Okay, so these weren't just, street urchins here. These were young men who came from someplace. Okay, make sense? And then verse 4, young men, let's look at this, without blemish and handsome in appearance, right? So first of all, they want you to look nice, right? Because why? Well, human beings, we do what? We respond to how people look, right? We're visual creatures, right? So when we appreciate when someone looks nice, when they're dressed nice, when they carry themselves a certain way. Do we not? Okay, so he was looking for young men without blemish, handsome in appearance. Then it goes down and it says, skillful in all wisdom, okay? Endowed with intelligence and discernment. So not just that they were smart, but they were discerning and discriminating as well, right? And quick to understand, competent to stand in the presence of the king, and able to serve in the king's palace. I want to just mention that a little bit. It's just like, it's not just enough to be smart. You have to know how to carry yourself in certain situations and observe certain protocols. The way that you would greet someone on the basketball court is not the way that you would greet someone if you were going before heads of state, right? When you go and see your boy, what's up, give me some dap, whatever they do now, I don't know. The kids do today. I'm old. But whatever they do, dap me up, smack me up, give me some 5, whatever. That's what they do, right? But you're not going to walk into other situations or certain situations that way, right? You're going to observe the protocol of where you're coming. So they wanted young men that not only looked the part, but also knew how to handle themselves. And of course, young men who came from good backgrounds, who came from noble backgrounds, royal backgrounds, would be familiar with that, correct? Okay, and then it says he also ordered Ashpenaz to teach them the literature and the language of the Chaldeans. So they had to be smart enough not only to know certain things and do things, but now and if you go down and read through the rest, they had, to gain more knowledge, but they also were in this program for 3 years. They had 3 years. Now, what I want to point out about this too is that Daniel at this time is a young man. He's probably a teenager. Because remember now, when the Jewish men or the young boys are considered men at 12 or 13, they have their bar mitzvah, I believe. And so they are considered men at that time. So we're looking back now, right? We're not looking in modern times where we don't say that children at that age are young men. These were considered young men. But he was a teenager. Right? So he was a young man going into this situation. But obviously he fit the bill, right? And then it talks about the king assigned daily rations. And the king, so if you see after that, they had to learn different languages and all of that. They had to learn the language of the place where they were in captive. And then it says, and in verse 5, the king assigned a daily ration for them from his finest food and from the wine which he drank. They were to be educated and nourished this way for 3 years. So at the end of that time, they were prepared to enter the king's service. Okay? All right. So we talked about what they were looking for in these young men. So obviously when we get to verse 6, it starts off, it says, among them from the sons of Judah were, who's the very first person? Daniel. So obviously Daniel fit the bill, did he not? Obviously Daniel must have fulfilled these requirements, right? And the word has made a point of letting us know what these requirements are, because it's giving us a little bit of giving us some background and understanding of who Daniel is and how he came to be in the situation that he's in. Okay? So now, let's look at this a little bit more. And then we also, which was interesting to me because I don't know how I knew it, but kind of didn't. I never really thought about Daniel and the three Hebrew boys together. I always kind of thought of them as separate entities, but they're actually tied closely together because you see them mentioned here together. It's Daniel and Hananiah and Mishael and Azariah, which are their Hebrew names, and we know them as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? But those were their Babylonian names. Their names that they were given at birth were the names that you see here, and those were their Jewish names, right? So you have these three young men, and you see there that it says, okay, that they're going to eat the food of the king, they're going to do all this stuff. So what I want to do is just break down a little bit of chapter 1 and just talk about Daniel and who he was, and keep in mind that at this time he's still a teenager. He's a young man. He's a kid almost. In our eyes, probably he would be considered a kid, right? So we can look at verse 3 and we can see that he came from noble background or whatever kind of background, because we can see where he came from, right? We can see the requirements, right? Also that he obviously had to be intelligent, because it talks about that in verse 4 and 5, right? And then, so now we've gotten all those requirements. Now we're down to where the king has picked him and the three boys, and now he's going to feed them the best of his meats and all that good, and his wine and all that stuff. And when we get down to verse 8, we see Daniel, the first time Daniel shows up in his extraordinary or excellent spirit starts to manifest itself, right? Because what does he say? What does it say about Daniel? It says, Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile, taint, dishonor himself with the king's finest food or with the wine which the king drank. So he asked the commander of the officials that he might be excused so that he would not defile himself. Do you have the King James for that verse? You do too? If one of you could just read that in the King James for me, verse 8. So you notice the word that Sister Brittany read, it said he had purposed, right? So Daniel, first and foremost, part of having an excellent spirit, he was a man of purpose. And what does the Amplified break that down to? Daniel had a made-up mind. Okay? So he had purposed in his heart. He had made up his mind that he was not going to defile himself. Okay? He was not going to. Now, just for people that may not know, do to the class, everybody except Elder Griffin. Again, everybody except Elder Griffin. Why would Daniel eating the king's food or drinking his wine, why would that defile him? Yes, they sacrificed their foods to idols, to their gods. So that would defile them. Also, if they served it with any blood in it, they were not allowed to eat any food with the Jews. They had a very strict diet that they were allowed to eat, and so if there was any blood still in the food, they would not be able to eat that. So it would defile him. Okay, so just trying to give you some background because we want to get full context. Yes, ma'am.
Isn't that what it was laid out for food?
Yeah, a lot in Leviticus. There's all the stuff about shellfish and about the stuff, the cloth they can't wear. It's a lot going on. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. It's a lot. But he had decided that he was not going to partake of that because he was not going to defile himself from what he had been raised. Because remember now, keep in mind while all this is going on, he has been taken as a young man captive. So, and he's surrounded by all these influences, kings, commissioners, precepts, star traps, whatever, Star Trek, all the stuff, look it up. He's surrounded by all of these people in positions of authority and power, most likely much older than him. He's in a strange place. He doesn't even know all of the language quite yet, right? So it would be very easy for him to just say, okay, I'm going to choose the path of least resistance, and I'm just going to go along to get along, right? But he doesn't do that. And and if you read through, Daniel always honors the law of who he's under. He's very respectful. Even when he comes out of the lion's den, you see him say to the king, God, I was found innocent before God, and I'm innocent before you. So he never went against, he obeyed those who had rule over him until it conflicted with the law of God. Okay? So keep that in mind, that this is a young man who's away from everything he knows. Obviously, he's been taken away from his parents, his family, everything. So it would be easy to just kind of go along to get along, but he doesn't do that because he has a what? An excellent spirit. Okay, all right. So now what happens? He has a made up mind. He's purpose. Look at what happens based just before we even get to the whole real big meat. And I'm building towards 6. Verse 9 says, now God granted Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the commander of the officials. Just kind of comes out of nowhere, right? That verse just because he's talking about, you don't want to eat the wine, you don't want to do this. But that's a scripture that stands all by itself in the middle of all that other stuff that's going on. I believe that the Lord allowed that because that was the result of him making up his mind and maintaining his purpose, being a man of purpose and resolve. And so because he did that, God honored that and allowed him to have favor, right? And you'll see all throughout Daniel that Daniel experienced favor. Okay? So now so when you purpose to do the things of God, he will grant you favor with man to accomplish the things he requires or calls you to do. Okay? So Daniel was equipped. He was a man with an excellent spirit. And because he stood on that, God backed him up. Okay? So, all right. Now, he was also a man of prayer. We know this, right? Because when we get to chapter 6, we see that he goes to pray, and that's how he ends up getting caught up. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too. But when we get there, you'll see that it mentions that he goes to pray as he always did. So that tells me that he was always praying, right? He was always praying. And because he was always praying, the people knew that, and that's what ended up, they tried to get him in trouble by doing that, right? He wasn't secretive about it. He lived his life out openly, and people were aware of that. That's why all through, if you read through Daniel, you'll see over and over, like I read in the beginning about the queen, and she talked about, there's this guy, and he's that your father knew and all that, and he knows this and he knows that. His reputation preceded him always. And you'll see that throughout Daniel if you take the time to read it on your own. It's actually, I got a lot out of it. I really did. Okay, so I just wanted to give you these things that you can pick out in the beginning here of who Daniel is and start building on his excellent spirit. Then he was also a man of wisdom. If we know that it said that they wanted people who had wisdom and were competent, correct? But also, when we get to the part where the young men don't partake of the king's food, so now this is where he's purposed to do not defile himself, right? The result of that is that, and if you look in verse 17 in chapter 1, it says, as for these 4 young men, so Daniel spoke up for him and his friends, right? The 3 Hebrew boys, he spoke up for all 3. He was like, just let us do this. Let us eat the veggies in the water, not do that. And then you can judge to see, who's the better one, who looks better. We know the story, who ended up looking better, right? But here's what happened. And so he found favor. The overseer allowed them to only eat vegetables and water. And then when you get to verse 17, it says, as for these 4 young men, God gave them knowledge and skill in all kinds of literature and wisdom. Daniel also understood all kinds of visions and dreams. So look at that. They were already considered intelligent young men that had wisdom, came from good backgrounds, were competent. But not only did they have that, God multiplied that. He gave them skill and knowledge in all kinds of literature and language, all kinds of wisdom in all areas. So it was multiplied. Make sense? Okay. So, and then at the end, we know that, they ended up looking better than the other people or whatever. So he let them go along. Now get down to verse 19. And I want you to take from this chapter 1 as we're moving towards 6, because that's really where my main thing, but where it talks about excellent spirit. But see here where we see Daniel in his youth exhibiting that excellent spirit, right? Because who's the person that challenges the overseer? Not only does he ask the overseer, can we just please let us just have water and vegetables. If you read it, the overseer says, I'm scared of my master, man. If I do that and then you guys are looking raggedy, I'm going to be in trouble. I could even die. And he's like, look, you let us do this and then you can judge after. Let us do it. Daniel challenges it. He's not afraid. He is not concerned. He's not worried. Because me, I'd have been like, well, I'll just eat what you want me to eat, because what if I don't eat it and then I do look pitiful and then I get in trouble, right? But Daniel doesn't do that. So we already see Daniel's faith and confidence in God, even as a youth. His faith in God, because he wouldn't have said to the overseer, if you read it, he says, put us to the test. So we know our God says that too, right? Prove me now in this. Right? And let me see, let me show you what I can do. Basically, that's what Daniel was saying. Test us. He didn't even say, do this in the name of my God or whatever. He just said, can you let us just have vegetables and water? Maybe he told him, that's not, we're supposed to eat that. But whatever, but the Lord allowed him to have favor with the man, and the man let him do it, and then ended up being good for him and for Daniel, right? So Daniel, he shows right here. Yes, ma'am. Oh, okay. He shows right in the very beginning. You don't see the words excellent spirit, but you can infer that there's an excellent spirit, because as a young man, he's already willing to step out and have confidence in God, right? And challenge the system that he's just been taken into in captivity. That's big time. Okay, right? That's awesome. Like when you really, what I got out of this was I really didn't know as much as I should have known about Daniel. Like I was all focused on the lion's den, but there's a lot more to him. There's a lot more substance to him than I really had taken the time to explore. Okay, I laughed too because the 3 Hebrew boys, he added them right in. Now maybe they talked about it beforehand. I don't know, but he was like, hey, just let us do it. And so they all 4 did it. Now they must have. I'm hoping they talked about it. Otherwise, I would be like, dude, how were you throwing us under the bus? You know what I mean? But you know what came to me? It came to me that the company you keep affects you. So that they were friends. They came from the thing together. Obviously, he had that kind of spirit. He's associated with people that have the same kind of spirit as him. And if you read, and we're not going to talk about it tonight, but if you read and get up to chapter 3, doesn't the 3 Hebrew boys kind of face a very similar challenge that Daniel does in the lion's den? And what's interesting, if you read it, when they come out of the furnace, and when Daniel comes out of the lion's den, the first thing they both say is, "O King, live forever." They both do. I just thought that was like an interesting thing. But that was an example to me. They go through similar results, right? And part of that is because I'm getting ahead of myself, but because they refuse to go against their God, right? So I said, oh, my phone. That's why you gotta have a real Bible. So as a result now, right, that Daniel said, we're not gonna eat, we're gonna challenge, I'm challenging this, I'm gonna make up my mind, I'm not gonna defile myself, I'm gonna maintain what I'm gonna do, and this is what I'm gonna do, and he challenged the man, and it worked out for them. Let's see what happened, right? I love this too. The king spoke with all of them, and among them all, meaning he spoke with all of them, because it wasn't just those 4 boys. There was a bunch of other ones that came, right? And maybe even some that were from there as well, that weren't from captive people, local young men that were being trained, right? So he says, the king spoke with them, and among them all, not one was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but that's what the name's there. So they were selected and assigned to stand before the king and enter his personal service. Verse 20, in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king consulted them, he found them to be 10 times better than all the learned magicians and enchanters, magi in his whole realm. Just let that sink in for a minute. Out of everybody else, all his folks, they were not just smart, they were 10 times. 10 times. Just from being, number one, unwavering and not compromising their faith, and being obedient, right? And then standing on that. Look at where they ended up. They didn't do much. They just said, we're going to eat vegetables and water. I don't know if I could do vegetables. But they said, we're going to do that, and we're going to maintain. And look at what happens. Not only does God protect them, but he elevates them. And they prosper in the land that they're being held captive. That's an important part, right? I don't want to let us forget that. Okay, so now we're going to fast forward to chapter 6, right? Because that's where we hear about this excellent spirit, and that's where it's the focus. We read chapter 5, and where it's found there, but my main hubbub here is going to be chapter 6, and when we we find Daniel in the lion's den, right? And this is where we see the excellent spirit manifest even more so, right? Because what's going on in this chapter? Okay, let's discuss it a little bit. Let's talk about how Daniel, now he's under another king now. So when we were seeing when he first came, he was under Nebuchadnezzar. Now he's under another king. This is Darius, right? King Darius had a brain. Before that, he was after Belshazzar, the one with the writing on the wall, who didn't have sense. But this Darius has some sense. He was a smart dude. He knew what he was doing. He actually declared the Lord was one God after Daniel came out of the thing. Okay, so now you see here, if you read in the beginning of chapter 6, Daniel was over all of these other people, over all the kingdom, right? He's all of these things. The king has decided that he wants to put certain people over his kingdom because he wants to make sure that things are run correctly, wants to have people who are loyal, wants to have people who are smart that can help him. I always say the smartest person in the room isn't the person who knows everything, or it's the person who surrounds themselves with people who know what they don't know, because you can't know everything. Right? So now Daniel is in this position of power and authority, right? Of influence, right? And again, a captive. He's not native, right? So, and then we find our basic scripture here, verse 3. It says, "Then this Daniel, because of the extraordinary or excellent spirit within him, began distinguishing himself among the commissioners and the satraps, and the king planned to appoint him over the entire realm." We read that earlier, right? Now, what you need to understand, Daniel is probably at this point like in his 80s. He's definitely a senior citizen because this is towards the end of the captivity. So think about it. The captivity lasted 70 years. If we say that he was a teenager when he went in, even if he was like 16 or 17, right? He'd be like in his 80s or late 70s, depending on where we are in the timeline, right? So now we've seen him as a young man. Now we're seeing how he's responding as an older man in his old age. And he's still distinguishing himself, right? It says he began distinguishing himself. So what happened was, because of who he was, because of that excellent spirit, because of the way that he honored his God and the things of God, he began to distinguish himself. And what happened? People got mad. That's what people always do. They get mad. But let's look at this. He stands out because of his excellent spirit, right? That's what we see in verse 3. Verse 4, it causes others to become jealous of him. People do that all the time when they see you. And sometimes, don't you want to say, hey, you can do this too if you do the same things I did, but are you willing to do it? Like, a lot of people just want to show up. They don't want to do the work to get what you get. They want to look at you and say, oh, you got that. And they want to stand next to you and get it by osmosis. It don't work that way. You have to put in the work. So he's been putting in work for a long time at this point, since he was a teenager. Now he's an old man, and he's still putting in work. Okay? And so it says in verse 4, "Then the other two commissioners and the satraps began trying to find a reason to bring a complaint against Daniel concerning the administration of the kingdom, but they could find no reason for accusation or evidence of corruption, because he was faithful, a man of high moral character and personal integrity, and no negligence or corruption of any kind was found in him." They couldn't pin anything on him. Because why? Because Daniel had an excellent spirit. He had an extraordinary spirit. And we're going to talk more about it, but I'm setting you up. So keep in mind that when you cultivate an excellent spirit in your life, people around you may begin to get jealous. Be prepared for that. Be prepared for that. It's going to come. Just keep doing what you're doing. And as we're going to see in this story, as we get further down, God will take care of the rest. Okay? So they said, so now look at this. The only way that they could find to trip him up was to use his faithfulness and obedience to God against him. Listen to what it says in verse 5. It says, then these men said, we will not find any basis for an accusation against this Daniel unless we find something against him in connection with the law of his God. What does that say about Daniel? That says that they knew that Daniel had an excellent spirit and that he had integrity, that he was not corrupt. They were probably skimming off the top and doing all kinds of stuff. So they was looking for see we've been doing it, so he must have been taking some money on the side. We've been doing it, so and they couldn't find anything. So then they figured it out. They said, you know what? The only way we're gonna get him is if we can get him against something with his God, because we know that he's faithful to that. We know. So what did they do? They plot and they schemed. And they went to the king and said, oh, do an edict, whatever. You can read it on your own time. And sign this thing and say that if you pray in the next 30 days to anyone else but the king, you're going to be thrown in the lion's den. So the king was like, okay, because a lot of times kings, they're not that bright either. They don't pay attention. They're not paying attention the whole time because they knew that Daniel was going to pray. They knew it, right? And what I love about it, if you go to verse 10, and 10 and 11, I believe it is. Hold on, let me find it. I'm trying to look. Hold on. Yeah. Yes, thank you. So check this out. So now they come, they say, we can't find anything, but we're gonna trick. We're gonna set a trap. So they set the trap. They get the king to sign this thing saying that you can't pray to anybody else but the king for 30 days, right? They knew. They had a whole plan. Here's what. Let me tell you how. Let me tell you what the excellent spirit Daniel did. Right? He refused to obey the law of man over the law of God. Right? He said, this is what verse 10 says in the Amplified. I love this. He says, now when Daniel knew that the document was signed. So Daniel knew all about it. He knew it was signed. He knew what it said. What does it say? Now when he knew that the document was signed, he went into his house. Now in his roof chamber where his windows were open toward Jerusalem. And what did he do? He continued to get down on his knees 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks before his God as he had been doing previously. Right? So I love that he says, now when he knew it was signed, when I read it, I said, it was like Daniel was going, oh, he was waiting, sign it. Sign it. I want you to sign it. Because remember now, too, Daniel has been walking faithfully with integrity all this time, right? All this time in captivity. God showed up when he said, yup, right, exactly. He said God showed faithful when he challenged them about their diet. He showed up and showed how they knew things, knowledge. They had knowledge beyond other people. Obviously, he had to know what happened to his boys when they got thrown into the fiery furnace, and God delivered them out of that. So God's been showing himself and faithful to these young men all out their lives. So now he's at that point, he was like, yup, I'm going to do it. Hey, whatever. And just like the Hebrew boys, I like to think that Daniel was thinking, hey, even if he don't, I'm still going to pray, right? I'm still going to do what I need to do, right? And I love that it says that as he had been doing previously, and I think in the King James says, as he has always done. When you have an excellent spirit, and when you cultivate an excellent spirit in your life, you will, it empowers you to do the things that God has called you to do, even in the face of extreme consequence. And in this case, he was facing what? Death. Thank you, Elder. Death. He was facing death. And so what I wrote in my notes was that the young people will get this one. I said Daniel was unbothered. He was an unbothered king. He was not bothered at all. He was like, whatever, bring it on, bring it on. You know what I mean? And so he said, I'm going to go pray, right? And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more because I want to focus on that. But what happens? What happens, right? We know the story, right? Daniel goes into the lion's den. The king's all upset. Matter of fact, I thought it was funny because if you read it, it says the king didn't sleep all night and he fasted. He didn't eat. He didn't do nothing. They said the king who's not even saved and fasts better than the Christians because we don't even want to fast. And the poor king, he was so worried about Daniel, he was fasting. Ain't that a mess? I thought that was a mess. So Daniel, they throw him in the lions, and even though the king don't want to do it, he feels bad, he's upset, it bothered him because he knew he knew the kind of man that Daniel was, and he respected that, and he honored that, right? And he appreciated it because he benefited from it. So why does he want to throw in his smartest dude, his dude that's got like all this favor on him from somewhere? They don't know, they call it of the gods because they don't know, but they know it's something extraordinary. They know it's something extraordinary. It's not like everybody else. It's not even like every other Hebrew that was walking around, right? Daniel was different, and he distinguished himself as different, as having an excellent spirit. And that's why when you read it, you'll see all throughout that word keeps coming up. Or you'll see references to him having the spirit of the gods. Again, they're not talking about our God, but obviously they know it's something greater than just a regular human being thing, right? But fast forward down to verse, so he goes in the lion's den. King comes running down, and it says, as soon as it got morning time, he was down there. Daniel, please, man. Whoo, God, please tell me your God delivered you, man, because I don't know what I'm going to do. And so Daniel yells out, and he says, oh, king, live forever. I'll live forever, king. I'm good. And I love it because he says, I was found innocent before my God, and I'm innocent before you, because what he did was not out of disobedience or disrespect to the king. And the king understood that, and he recognized that what was going on was not anybody looking out for him. Put it like that. So now the king, he gets upset because he's mad because they done messed with his main man, his thing, right? And so when he gets down there, so it says, and Daniel says, my O king, live forever. My God has sent his angel and has shut the mouths of the lions so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also before you, O king, I have committed no crime. Imagine that you can stand and tell, I haven't done anything. I haven't sinned before my God, and I haven't done anything wrong to you. I'm blameless. Okay? And then the king was greatly pleased and ordered that he was taken out of the lion's den, and no injury. But here we go. This is where I want to get, verse 24. Then the king gave a command, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and thrown into the den of lions. They, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Because they were hungry, first of all, because they've been sitting looking at a piece of meat all night that they couldn't eat. They was like, what? So they was like, when they got that, but think about that. So, and not only them, but their families, right? So Daniel was vindicated and avenged, and he didn't have to do a thing. He didn't have to do a thing. Just came out and said, hey, God did it. That's it. And people, I was listening to a thing on it, and they were saying the kids and and I remember my dad when he used to teach about Saul and how God told him to kill all the Amalekites, and Saul didn't do that, and my dad always used to say, when people would say, well, why would he say kill the children and all that? And my dad always used to say, because little Amalekites grow up to be big Amalekites. And big Amalekites do big Amalekite things, right? And Amalekites were no good, right? They was down low. Think about this. Those little boys, say they had just thrown the men who had plotted, right, in the lion's den. They have kids. Who's to say their kids don't grow up and now they want revenge? Right? So back, like they said when we was young, it's tight, but it's right. We don't realize we live in a really privileged time, because back then, you just being associated, you didn't even have to be you're just married to the man, and now you're going and getting eaten by lions. Like, dude, I didn't ask for all that. And my kids, exactly. You know what I mean? But again, think about it. These men, the type of character that they had, obviously that probably trickled into their family as well. Especially because they were the head of the house, right? As the head goes, so goes the body. Correct? Okay. So we see that, right? We see that? Okay, perfect. So now my question, how did Daniel cultivate an excellent spirit throughout his life? If you want to. Come on, Minister Will. Relationship with the Father. Prayer. Obedience. Fasting. Anything else? I don't want to cut anybody off. His loyalty. Yup. His faith. So what I did was I just took all them same things. You all said the same things that I would have said, right? Fasting. Well, I didn't say fasting, but I said, relationship, faith. What? No, knock it off. I don't have anything different. The only thing, if I would have had my PowerPoint, you would have seen each thing, and then right next to it, I have an equal sign, and next to each thing, it says prayer. Because think about it. Did Daniel have a concordance? Did Daniel have different versions of the Bible that he was walking around with? Tablets, the scrolls, any of that? Was he doing did he have any of that going on? Okay. Was he able to go? He's now remember, he's a captive. Was he going into the tabernacle and getting the word from the Torah or whoever and the rabbis and all of that, right? Was he able to do any of that? So was he studying, and then they probably certainly weren't promoting him to study any of the books of his religion, right? Or his God, right? If there was even anything available, right? So his only or main access to develop his relationship, to develop his faith, to develop his trust, to develop his knowledge of who God was through what? Through prayer. And Pastor has been teaching on that, because what happens for us, for Daniel, I got you. Prayer was Daniel's primary access to all the things of God. Primary. But unfortunately, what we do, we make prayer an afterthought or a last resort. So what I want you to get from the thing about all that I talked about, I know I kind of went all around, but excellent spirit, in order to cultivate an excellent spirit, Daniel had to maintain all of these things that we've been talking about, right? And the way that he maintained that, even in the midst of his captivity, is through his relationship with God. And his primary conduit, remember when it talked about he went up in his roof and prayed, right? He prayed when? 3 times a day. 3 times. He didn't, like me, sometimes I'm in a bed and I wake up and I'm tired. And I don't like mornings. I'm not a morning person at all. So I'm on my bed like this and I'm like, I want to pray. And I go, before I get out of bed, I go, thank you, Lord. To myself. I'm not even saying it out loud. Thank you, Lord, for waking me up today for another day that was not promised to me. I love you. You're so good, God. I ain't up yet. I ain't on my knees. I ain't on nothing. I'm just laying there calling myself talking to God. I'm talking to God. I'm doing a prayer. That's a drive-by. That's what I be doing sometimes. I'm just being honest. I'm being real. We don't. There have been times, and there are times that I do. I get on my face, I do it, but not to the level that I should, right? And that's what I mean by we make it an afterthought or a last resort. About that it was consistent. He did it, and you like it said in the notes, he did it throughout his life. And that's what I was trying to show by starting in Daniel 1 as a youth, and then we fast forward all these years later at the end of captivity, and he's still maintaining and doing the same thing. And what's beautiful about it is that's like it says, because it was such a part of him, he couldn't do anything else. It was natural for him, just like breathing, just like getting up, brushing his teeth, doing all that. It became, and I think there's a thing that says it takes 30 days to make something a habit. And so when you consistently do something for 30 days, if you can maintain it for 30 days, I don't know if it's true, but I think it's probably true or close to true. Because I know certain things that yes, and so you do it automatic. You absolutely. When I first had my bypass surgery, there were certain things that I had to do because of the bypass, and it was difficult when I first started because it wasn't what I was used to doing. You know, I'd been 300 pounds. I was eat what I want, do what I want. I was having issues. And then I had to change. I had to change that whole mindset. I had to change. And after I had my surgery, I remember for 6 weeks, all I did was lay on the couch and watch the Food Network and cry because I wanted to eat the food so bad. Because I used food as my comfort. I used food as my drug. It was my thing that I used to comfort myself, and I didn't deal with my emotions. I would eat, right? I was an emotional eater. So I just watched the Food Network and cried about all the food. And then my doctor one day said, Yeah, she cries because we took away her addiction. We took away the source of her addiction, and now we're going to see if she really wants to like lose weight or whatever. And something about that, a bell went off in my head. And from that moment and anybody that I was around at that time can tell you, I started dropping weight. My first few months, like everybody around me, my friends, all the people that I had surgery with in my group, they were losing weight. Like, not me. I was going so slow. And then after my doctor said that, a light bulb went off in my head. I changed the way I ate. I changed everything that I drank. I changed my mindset, everything. And I ended up dropping 150 pounds in a year and maintained it up until not long ago. So, but I'm still not as big as I was, but I mean, I gained some of it back. But it definitely, you can, and I had been eating bad and doing stuff for years. But once I purposed and had a made up mind, I was unstoppable. Okay, so and we're at the time limit. So I don't want to cut anybody off, but I want to just give these characteristics of an excellent spirit. Okay, and we definitely talked about prayer, and I want to make sure that I focus on that too, because that's why I said all the different things point right back to that, because one of the things that Pastor wanted me to drive home for you guys is an excellent spirit and how that relates in prayer. So I want to make sure that I don't just focus on all the other stuff, but one of the main points I want you to take away from today is Daniel's prayer life, because obviously that was a huge portion of what contributed to who he was. But the characteristics that I took away, and this will be the end for us, is the characteristics of an excellent spirit. One, true humility. Daniel served his captors. Remember when when the king pulled him out, he said, I was innocent before him, and I haven't committed any crime against you either. Even though they were his captors, he served them, and he served them with excellence, right? And his life spoke for him. He was fully obedient, or full obedience. I shouldn't say him. This is for you. So true humility, that's one. Number two, full obedience. What do I mean by full obedience? There is such a thing as halfway. Like I'm going to stop this, but I'm going to do that. No, it's full obedience. Example for Daniel, he refused to eat the food that would have defiled him. He refused. He didn't say, well, I'm going to just have the wine, or I'm just going to have this, and I won't eat anything else. No, it was full stop, right? Number three, endurance. Daniel was in captivity for 70 years, and we could see in the beginning he was doing the same thing, and he was distinguishing himself even still after all the years that he was in, right? Okay. 4, uncompromising stand with God's word. Uncompromising. Daniel refused to bow or worship, as well as the Hebrew boys. We saw that also in Daniel, before any other gods or the king, even unto death. Even unto death. So he did not compromise the word of God. The word of God says, I'm a jealous God. I ain't got no other gods before me. You're not worshiping anybody else. I don't care what the situation is. You don't do it. And he didn't do it. He didn't do it and then go, oh, God, I'm sorry, I was scared, that the lions were going to come. Absolutely not. He did it anyway, right? And my note here says, Daniel started in his youth and he maintained it in his old age. And then I put consistency. Thank you, evangelist. Thank you. And then just to end it real quick, I'm only 4 minutes over. I'm going now. Fun facts. Just quick fun facts. I noticed in Daniel, okay, so think about this. Abraham, he had his Hagar moment, right? Noah, he got lit. These are all men who are considered great men of faith, are they not? Great men of right. Abraham was a friend of God. Come on, right? Come on, come with me. You can't go through the Bible and look and show me one place where you see any dirt on Daniel. No dirt on Daniel, nowhere. Now, I don't know what he was doing, but I don't see anything recorded. And as much as God loved David and how great David was, he still thought to mention, hey, he murdered somebody. And he took somebody's wife, right? Abraham, friend of God. Abraham lied about his wife. God told him what to do, and he went and then he did Adam. Oh, my wife. I told you though, sir. I told you, sir. Your wife, she's right. You messed up. Didn't the man of God say that a few weeks ago? You messed up. So all of these men that you can think about, Daniel, not one thing will you find recorded negative about him. Just food for thought. Daniel, and then the last fun fact, he served under 4 separate administrations: Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, Darius, and Cyrus. And under all of those men, if you read, I'll go there right now really quick, and then that's how we'll end. And this is Daniel 6 and 28. So this man, Daniel, I love how they keep saying this man. I love that. I don't know what that's all about. But this man, not just a man, this man. This man, Daniel, prospered and enjoyed success, again, amplified, and enjoyed success in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. But if you look back, was he not successful under Nebuchadnezzar? Was he not successful under Belshazzar, right? So he prospered, he was well respected, he was looked at with well regard. Even the men who plotted against him knew he was a good dude, right? He experienced favor, and he was in a position of great influence. Kings listened to David's counsel. Kings called David for his word, and he was consistently described by the people around him as either having an excellent spirit or having the spirit of the gods, which, again, not our God, but they recognized that it was something supernatural. They realized that it was something extraordinary, right? And no one actually says it, so the Holy Spirit, God described him as having an excellent spirit, right? So those were just some little fun facts, because I just thought it was really cool. He lived through the whole time of captivity. He went in as a teenager, came out as an old man, and I just really, really love the fact that I couldn't find anything on him. Couldn't find anything on him at all. What an awesome testimony. To go through all that he went through, to go through captivity, to be plotted against, all of those things, to try to be tripped up, and yet, as it's recorded, I find no fault. Questions, comments?